I can see about half.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. I'm Harper LeBel, along with our founding father and co-host Vincent Turner. Today's show is brought to you by Jeremiah Long. He's our producer and engineer. And today on the Legends Show, we're going to talk about an old LA Ram great, one of the first Rams when I was born. That obviously had a fantastic NFL career. His collegiate career is also noteworthy, and we're going to talk about one Roman Gabriel today. Roman had a fantastic career with the Los Angeles Rams. He was in the National Football League for 16 years. You can see in the card there in the very middle of it, he ended his career at it came to a culmination there in Philadelphia. He was an Eagle, and we'll talk about all of that today. But first, Vincent, give us your first thoughts here about Roman Gabriel.
One of my favorite players of all time. Growing up in the 60s, when you think about the LA Rams, you thought about Roman Gabriel. You thought about a guy that could really throw the football. And what really sticks out on my mind, he had a lot of talents. Starred in one of the most favorite movies of my time, The Undefeated, with John Wayne, Rock Hudson, Bruce Cabin. And he played the role of Blue Boy, an Indian soldier in the Union Army. That's what I remember about Roman Gabriel. But the tall 6'5" phenom that can really throw the football. And he was out there in sunny California. One of my favorite players of all time. Back to you, Harp.
Rowan Martin's laughing. He was a guest on Gilligan's Island. He was on the Joey Bishop show. The Undefeated, as you mentioned, one of the movies that he was in. He had a guest spot on Wonder Woman. So Roman did look into exercising his acting talents after he was done. He was a broadcaster. He was also a coach for a few years. But after his NFL career, he certainly stayed in the limelight. But let's go back to the beginning for him. Roman Ildazo Jr. was born on August 5th on 1940 and of Filipino descent. His mother is Edna Mae Wyatt and his father is Roman Sr. Grew up in poverty. He grew up with asthma. He had all the reasons in the world to go, I don't think I can do this. But athletically, you mentioned that he was 6'5", big kid, especially when he was younger. From Wilmington, North Carolina, he ends up going to New Hanover High School. And Vincent, I'll be candid with you. I couldn't find a whole lot of stats or some information about him other than he was a great athlete. He got to play football while he was in high school, and he played well enough to be recruited by North Carolina State. He had a fantastic arm, so baseball was certainly a part. I don't know if he played basketball, but if you're 6'5" and you're in high school, and I'm the head coach, Vincent, I'm getting him on my team one way or another. Even if it's just for practice, I want to have that guy out there.
I'm going to tell you about New Haven, where he was born at in Wilmington, North Carolina, is that although you didn't find a lot of stats on him, but there's some real serious people that went to his high school that he followed. Sonny Jurgensen. Remember him?
Yes,
I played for the Washington Redskins, went to the University of Duke. A teammate of yours that went to Western Carolina, Clyde Simmons, was from that same high school, Roman Gabriel. But Roman Gabriel had to stand up to some really serious business in keeping New Haven in the mix. You know who else came out of that high school? He used to be on ABC News. David Brinkley. Back to you, Hawk.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay, that's a name I haven't heard in years. Peter Jennings, yes, but David Brinkley, guy, he was a very serious, stout man, and
yes,
excellent reporter back in the day, doing the evening news. Well, at North Carolina State, as a member of the Wolfpack, we all know that you can't play your freshman year, but in 1960, things started turning not only for the program, but for Roman specifically. Earl Edwards was the head coach. And North Carolina State ends up going 6-3-1. They were 4-1-1, and in the ACC in the conference. And oddly enough, you mentioned Duke. Duke ends up winning the conference with 5-1 overall record. North Carolina State, they beat Virginia Tech. They go to North Carolina. They win there. Virginia, Maryland, they lose to Duke. And I think that's why, obviously, the head-to-head competition and any tiebreaker that they would have, they lose 17-13 to Duke. They beat UCLA, and that picture that is basically the second one on the left down in the kind of the middle. That's a highlight there from the UCLA Bruin game that they had. So they play UCLA at the Memorial Coliseum. They win 7-0 in front of 23,000 fans. The UCLA Bruins and the SC Trojans used to share the LA Coliseum, but they beat Mississippi Southern, Wake Forest. They end up losing to Arizona State, and then they had a tie at the end of the season at South Carolina. So they go to where the Gamecocks were. That was an 8-8 tie. Didn't have tremendous numbers in terms of offense, but he certainly did more than anybody else at North Carolina State. And the Wolfpack quarterback there, Roman Gabriel, certainly had an impact there in 1960. In 61, they lose to Duke again. Duke ends up winning the ACC. North Carolina finishes 3-4 in the conference and 4-6 overall. They lose to Wyoming and North Carolina at the very beginning of the year. They beat Virginia. They lose to Alabama, who was ranked number 3 that year. 26-7 was the final there in front of 30,000 people in Tuscaloosa. They played at Denny Stadium back then. They lose to Duke. They lose to Maryland. They lose to Clemson at the end of the year. But Roman's career there was so good, and the numbers that he had in terms of just being able to pass the ball and improve the offense. At the end of that season, there was a basketball game, and the governor of the state of North Carolina ends up presenting him with an award as being the player of the year, and he had his number retired. So obviously his time at North Carolina State, he was a smart guy. He was an academic, but athletically, he turned some pages for the Wolfpack.
You think about all the great players that came out of North Carolina State over the years, a Vaughn Johnson, a Phillip Rivers, a Don Buckley, even a Bill Coward, a Ted Brown, a Torrey Hope. But what's so amazing about them, they talk about them, but they don't mention the great 6'5" statue. The guy that played Blue Boy and undefeated. And he is the one that set the tone for North Carolina State football, the Wolfpack. So now when I think about North Carolina State, I got to think about Roman Gabriel. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, there's some great players that came afterwards. Jim Richer is one, but when you get that Wolfpack, then they start doing their howling. That's a program that, if I can be honest, you're always looking up at UNC. You're always looking up at maybe some of the Clemsons there. And when they have their chance, and it doesn't happen every year, but man, they go nuts. Absolutely love their team. So it ends up being drafted number 1. Now, this is back in the time where the AFL was just getting started, and he was the number 1 pick there by the Oakland Raiders. And the money, actually, Vincent, was better to join the Raiders. But the number 1 pick in the 1962 draft by the Oakland Raiders, and then the LA Rams pick him as well. And the Rams didn't offer him anywhere close to the amount of money that Oakland did, but he ends up selecting the Rams and wants to go to Los Angeles. And for all intents and purposes, he sits on the bench for 2-3 years, waiting for his opportunity to play, where he might have been a guy that got to suit up right away and get on the field. Daryl LaMonica, if you remember, was the Oakland Raiders. The first Louisiana Lightning is the guy that was a starter for the Raiders and really took them to different heights. But they were struggling a little bit. It wasn't until Al Davis joins and things changed for the Raiders there. But from 1962 to 1972, 11 years that he spent in Los Angeles, and he certainly had a great career there and helped that Rams organization turn everything around.
You're talking about a guy that really has everything that we look in a modern day quarterback today: the arm strength, the delivery, the release quickness, the touch, the accuracy, the poise, the decision making. And what was so great back at that time, I was about 9 years old, and I remember the 1969 season when they played the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs, and the Vikings beat them 23-20. That same Vikings team that went to the Super Bowl and played the Kansas City Chiefs. But what was so great about that Rams team, and I love that LA Rams team, because let's face reality, California is a beautiful place. You from there, Mr. Harper LeBel. And that Rams team had Larry Smith. Look at the names on that team. Jack Snow, Willie Ellison out of Texas Southern, Dick Bass, the running back, Larry Smith, University of Florida, the fearsome foursome, Deacon Jones, Marilyn Olsen, Rosie Greer, Lamar Lundy out of Purdue University, Maxie Bond, the legend Texas A&M Jack Pardee. How could you not fall in love with the 69 LA Rams. And then they had a safety by the name of Richie Pettibone, former defensive coordinator of the Washington Redskins. I love the Rams team, and I'm going to share something with you. I was hoping that they come out of the NFC and play in the Super Bowl. And when they lost to the Minnesota Vikings, I kind of cracked a little tears because I love that LA Rams team. I'm not going to tell you no lie. I love that Rams team with Roman Gabriel under the center. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, the picture in the bottom left when they were in the blue uniforms, I don't know why, but I just thought that was something special. Remember, the Cowboys always used to want to play in white uniforms. They still do. And the Rams, very seldom did you see them in their road blues. But the uniform itself, now this is the white, right? The era with the blue and white. When they went blue and gold, that kind of captured my attention. But there are so many folks that say, I love the helmet. The helmet was so cool because it did look like a ram. And he had that one bar that went across there for his face mask. And big guy. Now, he couldn't run a lick, right? I think a stopwatch would never get Roman Gabriel with a time that would be impressive. But his arm strength, man, that was something else. And in the early Rams, Zeke Bratkowski and Bill Munson were the two quarterbacks that he had to compete against the first couple of years in the league. And those guys, when they started, the Rams were 4-27-2. When you stop to think about it, when Roman didn't play, when Roman did play, because they had injuries and there were spots where they didn't play well, they were 11-11 with Roman. And again, this is just the first couple years at the end. But the Packers, and remember back in those days, the Cleveland Browns were the teams to beat in the National Football League, and the Rams couldn't beat them. They gave it everything they could, but they weren't able to do it. But in 1973, things started to change. And when George Allen ends up taking over, actually, it was actually 1966, things changed for the Rams. They got better. They improved. In 66, they were 8-6. In 67, they were 11-1-2. Right, that's the first year of this. They lose to the Packers. In 68, they were 10-3-1. 69, you mentioned that was 11-3. Roman led the league with touchdowns. He had 24 that year. In 70, they were 9-4-1, 8-5 in 71, and things start to slip. And next thing you know, he's going to be a Philadelphia Eagle by the time that the 73 season kicks in. And the interesting point for me is that the Eagles gave up the kitchen sink to get him. Harold Jackson, Tony Baker, a 1974 first-round pick, and then 2 picks in 1975, a first and a third rounder. So the Eagles certainly wanted him. I thought he was a little long in tooth right there, but Philadelphia made the decision to get him. You see him in the middle of our display that we have. Roman wore number 5 early on in his Philadelphia career, and he ends up with an 86, 64 and 7 mark as a starting quarterback, throws for just under 30,000 yards, 201 touchdowns. He had a great NFL career.
The 73 season, when you just mentioned, everybody thought he was through and long in the tooth, but I remember him making really nice music with the young man out of Southern University, Mr. Harold Carmichael. And then he was making nice music with the young man they took over all the Eagles in 72 out of your part of the country, Charles Tree Young, USC. So when you look at this gentleman's career, he kind of like proved his people wrong who let him go out there in LA. This guy was a great quarterback, man. I mean, throwing the football. And I want to tell one more story right quick. My great time here in Atlanta when I moved here in 1996, and now up to now, I got a good friend that's from North Springs High School. His name is Joseph Taylor, Georgia State graduate. And he told me back in the day when they used to go watch the Falcons play at Atlanta County Fulton Stadium, his favorite player was Roman Gabriel. And I said, Joe, what's the reason behind that? He said, Vincent. Man, seeing that 6'5" statue throw that football, it was amazing because he said the ball spinned. It was like a laser coming off somebody's arm and them receivers catching it in stride. He said it was something to see, and he was eating his hot dog and cotton candy at the same time. He was ecstatic watching Roman Gabriel play quarterback for the LA Rams. Back to you, Harper.
Well, he had a great tight spiral. So did so many others back in that day. You got Joe Willie Namath really coming off the peak of his career in the early 70s. Joe would have his fingers all taped up. Sometimes his middle and ring finger were taped together, but he would throw a tight spiral. Terry Bradshaw by 72 had earned the starting spot there in with Pittsburgh. So two teams in the state of Pennsylvania that were both fighting for who's going to be the best quarterback. I think Bradshaw comes away with the winner there. We've talked about him before. Fran Tarkenton was still in the league. He didn't have that amazing tight spiral, but he just get the ball to you. Great numbers in 73 with the Eagles. He led the league with completions, with attempts. He had a 58.7 completion percentage. He threw for over 3,000 yards, and that was a rarity back then. He had 23 touchdowns, 12 interceptions in that 73 year. So that first season that he was with the Eagles, even though they were 5-8-1, they had to say, man, our quarterback problems are solved. We just need to build some base around him, and getting some wide receivers, as you mentioned, the 6'8" Harold Carmichael, Charlie. They had to be imposing when they broke the huddle and stepped up to the line of scrimmage. They were a giant team, at least initially when Roman first joins the Eagles. So a lot of interesting things that happened there. 4-7 in 74, 2-7 in 75, and 76 they were 1-3 before the strike, and he got hurt, and a lot of different things take place. But Roman Gabriel had a fantastic NFL career.
One thing about Roman Gabriel, like I said, he was one of the first true pocket quarterbacks. As you just mentioned a few seconds ago, he was a guy that wasn't going to scramble out of the pocket. He wasn't a guy that was going to try and make mobility and what we call throw on the run. I remember him, as I'm going to say it one more time, him standing in the pocket, standing against that rush and letting that ball go, and playing on some of them great LA Rams teams back in the day. The star power. Marilyn Olsen became a star in Hollywood. Roman Gabriel became somewhat a little star in Hollywood. Then you had Lamar Lundy. Ricky Pettibone became one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. And we know what Jack Pardee did down at the University of Houston with the Houston Oilers. It was a lot of talent. And the guy that held it all, George Allen. We think about George Allen later when he coached the Washington Redskins and had all those players that was old, and they called him the over-the-hill game. But George Allen brought the Rams together with that star power in the 60s. And what perfect place out there in California. Stars, Hollywood. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, George Allen had a heck of a career, really turning the Rams into contenders. Again, the Packers were at their peak. You look at some of the great teams that the Cleveland Browns had. Minnesota was just becoming one of those up-and-coming stars. Detroit was okay back in those days. They weren't great, but getting on the first Monday Night Football game, playing against the Jets. I mentioned the Lions, some close games with the Giants. Really, San Francisco, though, that was the thing. We haven't talked about John Brody, and I'm not saying we need to right now, but the Brody-led 49ers were a very good team back in those days. And of course, the upstart Dallas Cowboys were really turning things around there. So the competition to get there, they were good enough to do that, but to overcome those great teams from the NFL and the NFC specifically back in those days, they came this close on numerous occasions. But Roman Gabriel was certainly the leader of the LA Rams. He goes to Philadelphia. He has a great career there. And for obvious reasons, when he's done, he had a coaching career. There were a couple of different spots. Cal Poly Pomona, he was their head coach for 3 years. Just, I've got all this knowledge. I've got all this insight. I want to be able to share it. His last coaching experience was with the Raleigh-Durham Skyhawks there of the World League, and everything in between that. Had a great career. He was a broadcaster. We mentioned the acting, and he died peacefully on April 20th in 2024. So just a little more than a year ago, we lost Roman Gabriel, but certainly a guy that loved football. He was great at it, and one of those guys that earned the respect of so many players. He's not in the National League Football Hall of Fame, but he certainly is the College Football Hall of Fame. Had a great career.
When you think about Roman Gabriel, you think about North Carolina State, one of the greatest football players that came out of school and played at a high level in college. But I'm going to say it one more time. When I think about Roman Gabriel, man, I'm thinking about when he's with the LA Rams in 1969 with all those great players and the way he could throw the football. We talk about Joe Namath could throw a sparrow. We talk about, as you just mentioned, Terry Bradshaw, but he's the first one that actually stood in the pocket and took hits. I remember sometimes when he was in the pocket, he'd have a defensive lineman hanging on him. He still got it off pretty well in the air. Roman Gabriel, very special. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, because of his size, he wasn't the fastest guy, as we mentioned, but he was able to fend off numerous defensive ends, tackles, linebackers, and be able to just keep a play alive because of his strength and get the ball down the field and make something out of nothing. He's one of those guys that would make lemonade out of lemons. But Roman Gabriel had a fantastic career. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a second. But for those of you that like to take advantage of March Madness, the National Football League isn't in session right now, as we all know. But the NBA playoffs are right around the corner, and the NHL playoffs as well. And guess what? Baseball season is just about ready to get underway. If you'd like to take advantage of your savvy smarts, go to mybookie.ag for assistance with that. You can place bets and receive surprise rewards. There's free betting. There's gifts that they have, cash back, bonus prizes, and anything else that you would expect, including bonus benefits, are all a part of mybookie.com. If you use the promotional code MM50, that would certainly be appreciated because that's our code that we have with them, MM50. Again, go to mybookie.ag for all the information that you would need to know. You can set up an account and you can start wagering on some of the games, especially because of March Madness and college basketball right now. It's a great time for you to take advantage of that. So we certainly appreciate that. And Vincent, one thing I appreciate about Roman Gabriel, let's look at this. Most valuable player in 1969. He was a comeback player of the year in 1973. He was an all-pro in 69. Second team All-Pro 2 separate years. He went to the Pro Bowl 4 different times. He was the passing leader in the NFL in 1973. In 69 and 73, he was a touchdown leader. He won the Burt Bell Award. He was an All-American in college in 1960 and 61. He was the ACC Player of the Year in both of those years as well. His number 18 was retired by the North Carolina State Wolfpack. He threw for 29,444 yards. His passer rating was 74.3, and he's a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. Final thoughts on Roman Gabriel.
Final thoughts about Roman Gabriel. Saturday night at the house on 763 Dunn Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee. 9 years old. Mom and Dad lets me stay up late at night. I see my favorite Western, one of my favorite Westerns, The Undefeated. John Wayne, Rock Hudson, Bruce Cabot, Meredith Burgess, and the great Roman Gabriel playing that Indian Union soldier by the name of Blue Boy. If you're watching this today and our fans here 100 Yards of Football, go pull that great movie up. It's a classic on YouTube today. Thank you today, Mr. Harper LeBel. This gentleman right here was not only a great quarterback, he was a pretty good actor too. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, Roman Gabriel had a fantastic acting career. And he also had a tremendous National Football League and collegiate career as well. So we want to salute him and honor the great Roman Gabriel, number 18. I will consider, even though he finished up in Philadelphia, I will always consider him to be the first great LA Rams player. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate you being a part of the show. For Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, for our founder and co-host Vincent Turner, I'm Harper LeBel saying, have a great day, everybody.